Thank you for that introduction, Wallace. Thank you all for having me here. I'm Deborah Kraft. I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Deborah.
My sobriety date is January 15th, 2004. I've been here a few minutes. It's been a few minutes since I had a drink. And it is always my pleasure and an honor to be asked to come to anything that Alcoholics Anonymous asked me to do. I'm honored to be a part of the program. The program has not only changed my life, it has saved my life. It has given me a life that I never ever thought that I wanted or would have, and I'm forever grateful for that. I am a member of a home group in Nashville, North Carolina called A Vision for You. We meet at the Nashville Methodist Church on Main Street every Tuesday night at 7 o'clock. We are a big book study group. I've been fortunate that I have almost from the very beginning been a part of a big book study group, and it's been a big part of my journey, and I love the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. We studied the big book on the first several Tuesdays, but the last two, the next to the last one, we do a tradition, and on the last one we have a speaker now. We just started that. Our group just turned a year old in September, and I was very blessed to be part of the formation of a new group, which was a totally new experience for me. And I've learned a lot from that, and we've got a wonderful group, and you're all invited. If you come to Nashville on a Tuesday at 7, we're down in the basement at the Methodist Church. I want to thank Mary for coming with me. Give me a second here. Let me get out of my own way and my nerves get out of the way. It's great to see y'all here, though. There's a couple of people in this room that have been a big part of my whole journey. In fact, a bigger part than I could have known, because I actually got introduced to the program in a correctional facility, and that work, that type of service work, wouldn't be where it is today if it weren't for some people in this area that have been very strong in that and encouraged it. And it trickled down to Nash County and to Fountain Correctional Center, and I'm very grateful for that. But I'll start back at the beginning a little bit and tell you how I got where I got and what happened to me and what I'm like today, what my life is like today. I always say that I know this is a family disease. It is rampant in my family. I have stories about people, my grandmother's brothers, that one of them was in an asylum somewhere. I never even laid eyes on the guy, but I always heard about him. And when he died, nobody would claim his body. He was somewhere out in the Midwest in an asylum. He drank himself. He had a wet brain. And I remember as a child hearing about that. And there was another brother that drank. My grandmother never drank a drop. But I do remember on New Year's Eve, she did take a sip of champagne, and she turned bright red off of that one sip. And I think if Geneva would have had a few more drinks, she might would have been one too. I don't know, because that happened to me when I drank. I would get bright red, and it would hit me real quick. But she didn't drink, and my mom was not raised in a drinking household. And so she didn't really know about it. It wasn't immediately in there, and she was, my grandfather didn't drink, and my grandmother didn't drink, and so my mom had what I would consider normal childhood and got married at a young age, and they moved out of state and started to have a family, and they had my older brother and then myself, and the gentleman that she married, who is my biological father, did drink, but she didn't realize how much he drank because they were so young when they got married. He had lived at home with his parents, and they didn't let him do what he did once he got out from under their roof. And so she had no experience with living in a home where somebody drank so much that they didn't come back home or they didn't bring the check home. And that caused me to lose my father at such a young age that I've never laid eyes on him to my knowledge. They broke up when I was just a few months old. They tried to make it work, but she couldn't understand his drinking, and he, by all accounts, was a fine fellow. He was a good man. People said he was funny and nice and engaging and handsome and all the things you would want, and was a very good salesman, good at his jobs that he had, and a good income producer when he wasn't drinking. And it was always when he wasn't drinking. So that marriage broke up, and I never got to know him. And my mother remarried to another gentleman, and he adopted my older brother and myself. and we were raised on a farm in Nash County. And the man that she married, who was my second father, who I considered my dad, he also drank. But he didn't drink to the extent, and our book tells us there's many, many, many types of alcoholic drinkers. My dad that raised me drank mostly on the weekends or at nights, but it didn't prevent him from earning a living and taking care of us. And he was a good dad. He was a good man. And he provided for us. He farmed, and he was able to drink more in the winter or when there wasn't a farm thing going on. But over the years, it became apparent that he drank alcoholically. I remember just being used to it, though. I accepted it. And it's somewhere in there, my mom also decided that she couldn't beat him, she'd join him. And I can tell you today that both of my parents got sober through the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, and they were my introduction to the program. They called themselves alcoholics, and my dad actually had 10 years of sobriety before he died, just almost 3 years ago. And I was really grateful for that. But so throughout growing up, we accepted drinking into our home, and as kids, we didn't know different because we lived in a rural area. And any of you who grew up in an alcoholic home know that the alcoholic parents don't really invite people into the home unless they drink the way that they do a whole lot. So I didn't have a lot to compare it to. The only other people that I saw did drink that way. And I didn't realize there's anything wrong with it, honestly. I just thought that's what the grown-ups do. They get silly and ridiculous sometimes on the weekends, or sometimes parents get more aggravating at night than they are during the day. And I didn't really know, I don't think I put much thought behind it being unusual or different or anything. But as I got older, I realized I didn't like it. And I remember a few times pouring the alcohol out. I would find a bottle and sometimes pour it out, and I would get in trouble for that. And they would tell me, why are you doing that? And so you would think that growing up this way that I wouldn't have drank. I would think that. I mean, it would make sense that I wouldn't have wanted it. But I was a really shy kid. I didn't have a lot of friends. I hadn't, like I said, because we kind of isolated out to our little clan out in the country, I didn't know how to deal with other people or interact. I always felt disconnected. I read a lot of books, stayed in my room a lot, and imagined and daydreamed about what I was going to be like. And when I was about 15 and I got a chance to drink, the very first thing that I drank. It never occurred to me that maybe I don't like the way drinking affects my parents and I shouldn't do it. I didn't think that way. I know people who did think that way. They grew up in an alcoholic home and they just didn't choose to do that. I chose to do that. I drank, and I liked it right off the bat. And I, as a teenager, actually used it. It greased the wheels for me. That shy, awkward, disconnected kid that didn't have any self-confidence could do and say a whole lot of stuff with alcohol in her. And that's the way I went throughout my high school years. Now, my grades failed. They weren't that great in the first place because I was a whole lot of my own, like to do what I like to do, not what the teacher asked me to do. And they would call my parents in and tell them I was an underachiever and that I was very bright and that I should be making these grades. And nobody ever talked about, the home life or anything. It was decided that I was basically a spoiled brat and I didn't like to do my homework, and that was what we went on with, and I bought into that too. And but I had started to get into trouble with my drinking, and I barely graduated. I did graduate. I had all my credits, but my grades were poor. But I had already gotten a DWI, like when I was 16, a DUI, they called them back then. And that was when I first started to wonder why I was being picked on. Because my other friends didn't have DUIs, and I didn't, everybody drank, right? And so I was pretty mad about it, and I felt sort of it was my unlucky star that I was under and that I was being picked on. And went on about my business. I got in a little trouble at home, but they couldn't say too much because I could say back, which is what I would do. You drink, or I don't know. I didn't get the full punishment that I might have gotten otherwise. But I went ahead and graduated, and I went off to school in Raleigh to a business college that I got to go to, and I based my decision on the college the college day that we had, they sent a really nice looking young guy out there, and he was very charming. And he told us that if we went to this school versus going to one of the schools that my mom wanted me to go to, like the girls' schools and things where you live in a dorm and whatnot, that we could live in these apartments. And they had cake parties every Wednesday. And, I had all this like in my head about, oh, that's going to be so great, and I'm just what I'm going to do. And at that point, my parents were ready for me to go because I was just causing chaos and not following rules. And I had a younger brother and sister at this point. They ended up being 4 of us. And so it was time for me to just get on and go cause trouble somewhere else. And so I did. I moved to Raleigh, and I really started drinking. I had a fake ID. They started changing the drinking age on me. It was like almost when I get old enough to drink, I was in that group of kids that they started raising the North Carolina drinking age. I'd almost be there and they'd raise it up another year. So I had to get fake IDs, and I made that work. I got to most of the places I wanted to go to. But while I was living up there, I soon realized I was flunking out of school because I couldn't get up in the mornings. I couldn't go. I just couldn't function. I couldn't function like other people. Again, I felt this disconnection that had always been with me. I could watch you doing what you were doing, and I could see that you were doing it, and I knew I was smarter than you, but I couldn't figure out why I couldn't do it. And I just didn't, I could never connect the dots there, but it never occurred to me to take the drinking out either. It never occurred to me. I ended up withdrawing because I was failing. I was failing out. I didn't want my parents to know that, and I told them that I had decided I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, and I needed to go to work and try to find out what it is that I wanted to do. And so they said, okay. So I got a job, and I went to work in an insurance company as an administrative assistant, and that was pretty exciting at first because I bought a lot of new clothes, and I got to dress up and be in an office building and have a typewriter, and I had no interest at all in being anybody's administrative assistant. But I didn't put that together until I found out what I had to do. I wanted to talk on the phone and make plans and do my thing from that office. And that's what I pretty much did most of the time. I didn't get it. And I have to, I go back and I'm always reliving my life, trying to figure out where I went wrong on this or where I went wrong on that. I don't know if any of you suffer from that. But I go back and I'll think, well, my dad was a farmer, and he did what he wanted to do, and Mom stayed at home, and I never watched anybody get up and go to work every day, so that's why I didn't go. But they told me to come every day. I just didn't. Okay, I didn't know how to pull that off, and I would call in late. I would go every day. I just wouldn't go at 8:00 every day, and I would call them and tell them I wasn't feeling great, and I'd be there in a little while, and they put up with me for a year, and they were very nice. They told me that they needed someone more mature. And I saw that coming, but I was still devastated. And from that, I learned a good lesson, which carried me on for many years, which was to see those signs and to leave before they tell you to leave. That saved me many. It's so much easier to leave than to be told to leave, don't you think? So I got out of that one. I had already taken on a second job waiting tables, which was something I had already picked up during high school, and that would serve me well. I was waiting tables part-time, so then I just made it full-time. And I set about trying to decide what I was going to do. I was either going to get a job on a cruise ship or join the Navy or, write a book. And, I had all these good non-practical ideas for how I was going to make this big splash, the life that I needed to have. I couldn't ever imagine having a mundane, ordinary life. I didn't see just going to work every day at 8 and getting off at 5 as being my life. It never looked like my life. It never felt like my life. And little did I know what was in store for me, because that certainly wasn't the life that I wound up with. But my I didn't have a boring life, but it wasn't the glamorous, fun life, I guess, always that I wanted. But I tried to join the Navy, and that for some reason didn't work out. And I don't know why, except that it was God maybe intervening on something that didn't need to happen. Because I went to the recruiters and I told them I wanted to join. I had gotten another DWI at this point, and I had no license. So I thought it would be good to go into the Navy and just ride that out and go on a ship or something, or a cruise ship, somewhere where you didn't need a car. And they those recruiters started coming to our apartment. I think they just liked my roommate. I don't know. They kept coming to our apartment, but they said, well, we're going to call you when it's time for you to come. I even went and had a physical, and I took the test, and I spent the night in a hotel room and got shots. But they never, ever, ever called me to come. And I don't know if it's because of that DWI that I had, that somebody upstairs didn't want me, but they didn't tell me anything except, we'll call you when we want you, and they never did. And so time went on, and I forgot about it, and I had moved back to North Carolina because at this point I'd gotten depressed. I could not get a boyfriend to stay around or have a relationship of any kind. Every relationship I had, and I was the nicest person you'd ever want to meet, but I couldn't make things last. And I was sad about it. I would get depressed, and I had heard my mom and some of my aunts be depressed and go off to stay for a little while and come back, and they would take pills for that. And so I started getting into that's what's wrong with me. I've got what my mom's got, and it's called depression, and I've got mental illness, and I tried different things like that. Meanwhile, my younger brother, who had some other issues outside of alcohol, his problems took off at a faster pace than mine had, and he wound up in a rehabilitation center in Raleigh. And I remember going to visit with him and wondering, do I need to be here? Do I need to be here? Do I need to be here? And I talked to a counselor at my mother's suggestion after that second DWI, and they did not suggest AA to me or that I needed help. And the DWIs that I had, they would send me to alcohol classes, but nobody sent me to AA. And today I make a point to try to talk to young people when I get the opportunity, or when I go into treatment centers as service work, because I don't know why I didn't get introduced to it until I was so much older. I had all the signs. But I had come back home to North Carolina because of that depression and whatever was going on with me. And, of course, didn't get into AA. I got another job as a waitress with some of my old friends. And I met this guy. And this was the first guy that I would call the relationship. He was a lot older than me, and he was going through a messy divorce. And my parents didn't approve at all. And it had everything that I probably needed at that time to make it last. So that's what I did. Was I thought that I was in love with this person and we would get married, and that would be what I would do. And he was very impressive to me because he wore a suit and a tie. He sold cars, but he looked very important to me because he dressed up in his tie. And I was in the middle of a drama of that divorce he was going through somehow, and he was already in the middle of that divorce before I met him, but somehow I ended up being in the middle of it. And I found that over time that I would get drawn into people who had a lot of drama. That's what would attract me, because I could live, I guess, through their problems maybe, and not think of my own. So I would take up these causes, and I took up his cause and his problems and his battles. And he had some serious issues other than alcohol as well, and I had no idea about that. But I was drawn in, and I later realized, that it was a lot going on that I didn't see. I had been very naive, and I was in too far to get out at that point. And he got into some trouble with the law and was told to move out of state, and by the judge supposedly. I don't know, I wasn't in the courtroom, but that's what he told me he had to do, was to leave the state. And he did. He went to New Jersey to get a job with his brother-in-law, and I soon followed. And I had waited until I turned 21, which was right after he left. So I've already had 2 DWIs, and I'm in all this mess, and I've been fired from jobs, and I'm just finally getting to be old enough to drink legally. So there's a lot going on. I find myself in him, and then, when we get up to New Jersey and get away from all the people who have told me not to be with him, it's not as attractive as it was when everyone was telling me not to do it. And so I tried to make it work for a while, and we could not make it work. But what I did find was that I really loved being up north. And I had gotten a job that I really liked, and I had made some friends, and I wasn't drinking much. I found, too, that was another thing that I would do, was I would get in a relationship with someone who had some issues that I would deem more serious than mine. More, they may not have been, but to me, he was worse than I was. So it would make me not need to drink as much, maybe, because I had to fixate on what he was doing, and I was the good one. and I could tell him what to do. And so this was a thing that would happen with me, and that relationship would end, and my drinking would take back off. And then I would start getting into trouble, and bad things would start happening again. But it seemed to somehow almost parasitic in nature that I could get on the back of someone worse than me, and I could do better than them for a while. And that was going on, and that relationship ended, and I stayed there, and I had ideas. I was glad to be out from under anybody who knew me or had expectations of me, and I was thinking I could really change and find some success, and I could have, and I did, except that I took me and my drinking with me. I would find some good things, and they would start happening. I wanted to be into acting. In high school, I had done a lot of plays. I had been in several plays and liked the theater, and that appealed to that need that I had to do something glamorous and larger than life. So I signed up for acting classes in New York City, and I would ride in on the train from New Jersey every Saturday, and then that got to be fun for me, and so I made luck worked out, and I met a girl, a little Irish girl. We became friends, and she lived in the Bronx, and so I moved in with her. We became roommates, and I left the friends that I had in New Jersey, and moved up there. And that would have been great because I was involved in things that I enjoyed that were stimulating and creative, and I could have found success. I'm not sure, because the drinking took to first place. It took over the partying, and there was a lot of partying and a lot of fun in New York City, and I started to partake of that, and I was able to get a job in the Wall Street area as a cocktail waitress and as a bartender, and I made a lot of money. I spent a lot of money, and I actually started to scare myself because the bars don't even close really in New York, and it's like, when do you go home? If nobody makes you go home and you don't run out of money, you can just keep going, and I hadn't really experienced that until then. And I started to have some fear. I could see this ending badly. I could see something bad happening, and bad things did happen, but now they're funny bad things. It didn't get that serious. Like I would fall asleep on the train and ride to the end of the stop and have to go to the ATM and get out $100 to try to get back home. Things like that happened a lot, but I didn't have anything terrible happen. But I met a guy, and that, I realized that for survival purposes, I needed that. And he was, again, a lot older than I was, and gave me some rules to live by, and I followed them. He meant enough to me that I would do that, and I was able to find success again. He said, you need to quit acting. That's ridiculous. You need to quit bartending and working down in Wall Street, because that's ridiculous. Get a job in a dentist office and be a dental assistant, and we'll only drink on Saturday, and you'll be good. And that's what I did. And you know what? It worked great. I was very successful for a number of years doing that, and saved money, finally for the first time had credit, like built credit, had savings, and was doing grown-up things with my stuff, and all under someone telling me, giving me some rules to live by, because I had none. I had never had any rules to live by, any principles that I lived by, and didn't realize that I needed them even. Didn't even know. That's how ignorant I was to it. I didn't even know what I didn't have. And I felt connected because I was connected through somebody else, and he could tell me what to do. And that was fine, except that I wanted to get married, and he didn't. And after a while, he did give me a nice engagement ring, but there never was a wedding date set. And after a couple of years, I got a resentment. And we know what happens when we get a resentment. And I started to sabotage that relationship, started to drink again when I wanted to drink, and then realized I wasn't going to be able to maintain the job in the dentist office or that relationship, and all that blew up on me. And then, to make matters worse, because I left thinking to show him a lesson, and then soon he'd come back and we could do what I wanted to do, he married somebody else, like right away, like really fast. And you can't do that to an alcoholic. You know, I mean, if you're an alcoholic, you know what that did. That just set things really in motion. And I drank at that situation harder than I've ever drank at anything in my life. And I cried over it, and I started to drink alone and play sad songs and set up the atmosphere and just revel in it and sit in it. And God, somebody needed to come and grab me by the hair and say, snap out of it. I stopped eating, I lost a lot of weight, and then my friends finally did tell me that I needed to do something because I was getting really thin. And I was looking sickly thin, and they said, you need to do something. And so I started going to a psychiatrist. And she, I don't know what she did for me. She didn't ask me much about my drinking. She did help me a little bit. We talked about sort of my past, and she gave me practical answers. They weren't spiritual answers. I never knew that it was anything spiritual that was wrong with me, so I hadn't really looked in that direction. I don't know what, but briefly it helped that she put me on medicine, but then at that point the medicine was new, and it's a medicine that today it's known that you shouldn't drink with it, but she told me, we're not sure how this reacts with alcohol, so I would suggest that you don't drink with it. But to me, that meant you can drink with it, because it was, it was just a suggestion. And I had a lot of blackouts, and things got really bad, and I got as low as I could get with that. I drug it out as long as I could, and then I knew that I was almost suicidal. And then I decided that I could do something else. I could find another guy and have a baby, because that would certainly make me feel better, and that's what I did. And the man that I was to be with, it was sort of a strange arrangement we had. I had known him for a while, and he was this big guy in the bar that I hung out in. And the level of bars I was hanging out in had been decreasing, because I needed to go to places where I could drink like I needed to drink and hopefully not be thrown out. And I had found this place, and it was in Hell's Kitchen in New York City, corner 46th Street and 8th Avenue. And there was a big guy that hung out in the back of the bar doing whatever it was they did in the back of the bar, and I wanted to be part of that. It looked attractive to me. And so I did. I worked my way into that, and I was very fortunate, actually, that those guys that were, by all accounts, probably bad guys, but they were nice to me. I pretty well got looked after, and I ended up married to one of them, and we have two beautiful, beautiful, beautiful boys that are now big teenagers, but they are wonderful, wonderful kids. And that relationship, I thought that I was marrying him so I could stay in New York and survive, because I couldn't keep a job anymore. I couldn't even keep a bartending job anymore. And I wanted to have the baby. Well, he knew that I was from North Carolina, and I think he saw that as a way to get out of New York. And I didn't know we were at cross purposes, but as soon as I had the baby, we wound up back in North Carolina on the farm, in a double wide trailer on my daddy's farm with my big, giant Puerto Rican guy who was the bad guy from the bar that I thought was going to show me this exciting life. Everything just got all twisted up. So he gets a job at the Budweiser plant, and I start to have the other child. So we have two now. We had one when we came, and immediately we had another one. And I'm not happy. I'm not happy. I love the boys more than anything in the world, but I'm just not happy. And I decided, I had gone back to school, and I was going to nursing school. That's what I was going to do, and I was making really good grades. And so I started thinking, because I think a lot. I have a lot of ideas. And I thought that, well, I didn't feel connected to that marriage anymore. He's doing what he's doing, and we're here, and it doesn't feel right. It's not as much fun as it was when we were in New York together. And so you need to leave. And if you leave, then I'll stay here. And I was thinking, if he leaves, I can probably get financial aid, and then I'll have the kids, and then I can do what I want to do, and all these plots, that come to me, And so he left, and it was hard, but we weren't getting along, and we were trading the kids back and forth. On the weekends, I would work and drink, and during the week, I would go to school and take care of the kids, and they would be in pre-K or go to my mom's while I was in class. But there was a weekend when he didn't get them. He was mad with me probably. He just didn't get them. He didn't answer the phone. And I didn't know how to turn it off. I had got to where I wasn't drinking a whole lot during the week when they were around, or if they were, it was like if my sister was there. I was sort of halfway trying to be responsible. But that weekend, I didn't know how to not drink on a Saturday, and he didn't get the kids, so I took them with me. And we went out to this pizza place with some friends, and I drank beer and ate pizza at lunch, and I drank throughout the day. And went back to my friend's apartment, and I left the kids there to go out and do I don't even know what. When I came back, it was the wee hours of the morning, and my children, who were really small, had woken up, and they wanted to go home. and everybody else was asleep. And so I said, well, I'll take them home and we'll drive, and I'll get them some breakfast and we'll watch the cartoons and I can catch some sleep, because I hadn't been asleep yet. It was the wee hours of the morning. But there was another plan in place, and I don't know what happened, but I know that when I came to, there was lights flashing all around me. There was red lights, blue lights, and people wearing uniforms and looking at me like I was from Mars. And my children were in the back seat crying, and we were in the car. And I'm thinking, I have no idea where I'm at, what I'm doing here, why is this happening, what have I done? Oh no, I cannot fix this one. I can't fix this one. I've been caught. It's like my double life that I had, where I was a student, I was a mommy, and then I was this bartender on the weekends. The worlds had collided. And so the kids had turned the car off. I had passed out behind the wheel, I guess, with my foot on the brake. So it didn't roll into anything. We were just in the little embankment next to the road in the weeds, about a block from the hospital. And I don't know why it wasn't even, I must have gotten lost. I must have went into a blackout, and because that wasn't a road I should have been on to get home. And I knew the roads. It was the area where I grew up. But they thought I was having some kind of health problems until they saw the beer can in the car, and then they realized, oh, okay. So they called the Child Protective Services and Social Services, and these people now become a part of my world. And this had never happened to me before, and I hadn't known anyone really who this had happened to. And I was so mad with myself, and I was mad with the world, and I was mad with everything, because there was no way to explain that I am a good person, I am a good mother. This is not me, because it was me. And it is just the most amazing thing I've ever been through, that whole turmoil of emotions. And I felt bad, because here's these kids, and they love me and I love them, and they're going to be taken, and I don't know what I can do to change it. I don't even know how I got here. Well, their dad came and got them, and my mom and dad came, and nobody was wanting to help me by calling any lawyers or anything like that. Nobody was on my side. And I refuse the breathalyzer. I get taken to the emergency room, and I want to shut the door, because I'm in nursing school, remember, and there's people that work in the emergency room that are in nursing school with me, and they can't see this. I've got to keep this under wraps, right? So I'm shutting the door, and the officers are making me keep it open, and we're fighting over the door, and it breaks into a big deal. It got really bad. It did. And I racked up a lot of charges. And I made things much worse for myself. But it was almost like I was like an animal backed into a corner. I didn't have anything to lose. I felt like I had nothing left to lose. Wound up in Coastal Plain Hospital for about 13 days. I was hiding out waiting to see if I was going to lose my license. That's what I was worried about at that point. And because I didn't see how I could make anything work if I lost my license. And what happened after that was that my world changed dramatically. I ended up getting supervised intensive probation, which I knew I couldn't do, but I didn't know what the alternative was, because I couldn't leave my kids. But their dad, the protective service lady, told him that if he wanted to get full custody, that she would back him on it, that I had given them all the ammunition. So he took that opportunity to do that. And so then, I was angry, because these are my kids. They're mine, right? You can't tell me I can't do what I want to with them, but that's what happened. And I tried to do the intensive probation, and at this point, I'm still not been told once to go to AA, which is amazing to me. But I didn't know how to live. I took the antabuse. I asked for things like that to help me stop drinking. I went to some psychology group meetings or something at the treatment center to not drink. But I was angry, and I didn't know how to live without alcohol. I didn't want to drink, but I didn't know how to not drink. And I couldn't do. It was the worst feeling in the world. I didn't know what to do. Everything was coming apart. And so finally, I did drink. I started to drink again when I could get out of the house. And I got another DWI, driving a car home. while I was on intensive probation. And this was amazing because this was the only DWI, and I had gotten several that I hadn't even mentioned in between there. But this was the only DWI that I got where I was actually not what I would call drunk. I was driving somebody else's vehicle, and there was no bad driving. The only reason I got pulled over was because there was a little light out over the license plate. And that absolutely needed to happen because at that point I was headed for the end. So they gave me the DWI. I blew just over the legal limit, and I had to go tell my probation officer that I had this happen. And she said, "How did you get here?" And I wouldn't tell her. It was because I had driven and I wasn't supposed to be driving. And so she sent them out to follow me and give me another ticket for driving without a license. And all those other charges that I racked up when I was fighting with the officer at the emergency room, I mean, the deck was stacked. And I went home and I decided that this was pretty much the end of the road, this was the suicide thing. This was the thing I had thought of before but had put it on hold, and it was time because I didn't have any way to have a life. I didn't know what to do. And so I thought everybody will be better off without me because everybody's against me and I can't do this. I don't know what to do. And I took all these pills. I had hoarded up all these pills from different people that I could get them from that I thought had some. And I took those, and I took a whole lot of allergy medicine and everything I could find, and I went to sleep. And then my parents actually said, "Do you want to go with us to an AA meeting?" And I said, "No." I was at their house upstairs. I'm going to be busy killing myself, but I didn't say that. So they left, and the phone rang, and when it did, it hit me with like a ton of bricks. Oh my God, my children, this will ruin them. If I die, what if I've taken enough to die? This will ruin my children. And so I had the first unselfish action probably that I could have had, and I decided I had to live, even if I didn't want to, for them. And I called my brother. He came and got me and took me to the emergency room where they were very afraid to see me. And they were all looking at me like this. And they called the sheriff. So they gave me like charcoal and they pumped me out. And they took me in shackles to Cherry Hospital. And the sheriff said, "Well, you don't look dangerous." They said, "I had to watch out for you." And I was like, it's a long story. But at this point, I was very defeated. I had no more fight left in me. And I was just absolutely done. And I got to Cherry Hospital, and I waited for somebody to rescue me, but there was not a friend, a boyfriend, or a family member, or anything like that came to rescue me. It was the probation officer. And she got me out and took me to county jail. And I sat there for 30 days. And I tried to go on a hunger strike, but nobody even cared. It didn't make any difference. It was like there was nowhere to go. So it was like I said, there was even more defeat. And I finally got defeated enough to cry out to God and say, "This is really the end of the road here. I can't even die successfully. I can't live, I can't die. If there is something else, please show me what it is, and I will do whatever it is that you need for me to do. But please." And I started to pray that very desperate prayer a lot. And I got, my probation got violated, and I got taken to Fountain Correctional Center for Women, where I stayed for about 5.5 months. And while I was there, I started attending AA meetings. They were being brought in. And the girl who was bringing it in actually was somebody that I knew. I was acquainted with her. I had her family and my family. Her dad and my dad used to drink together. I knew who she was. And I knew that she had been through her share of problems as well. And I went to a few meetings. And then I got out, and I had nobody welcoming me back. And they were all, like, whenever I would try to call home, like my mom was just still mad with me about everything. And there was no way to make up for it or explain it. I couldn't figure it out. So I had found a girl, another inmate, suggested a halfway house. And I didn't even know about a halfway house. And she had been in one in Wilmington and had had some success there at some point. And she called the lady, and the lady, she knew her, and said, "I think this girl really wants something." And I had no money because I had no one willing to help me. And I went penniless and with nothing to Wilmington, to a halfway house. And I started over. And I got on my feet. I started going to meetings. And a great sponsor found me. I didn't find her. She claimed to me. She had a lot of sobriety, and she was heavy into the big book. And I thought she was something like a Nazi, because she wouldn't let me talk to any men at all, ever. Not even sitting there. I'm in a meeting. And today I understand why. But at the time I was like, what is wrong with this? What's wrong with her? But she gave me a good foundation, and I learned how to not drink and how to develop in the fellowship. And it was absolutely the fellowship that was keeping me for a little while there. I hadn't even seen the big picture yet. I just knew that something was working and that people in AA were smiling at me. And actually, when I told them I'd been in prison, they were sort of intrigued with it instead of like, they weren't like running away from me. They were asking questions about it. And I was able to develop into something different while I was there. And what amazed me the most was it wasn't long before people were calling me saying, my mom and my ex-husband were calling me saying, when are you going to come home and raise your children? And they had told me I couldn't even see my children, I thought. So it's amazing how quickly people started to notice that something was different. So I came back, and the husband and I tried to reconcile that marriage, and we did the best we could with that. It didn't work, but we did manage to stay together for about 7 years. And I was sober throughout the whole time. And he did the best he could to find a way of life that would match mine. And those children got a good foundation. We couldn't make the marriage work, but when we did actually divorce, I didn't have to fight him for custody. He went to see his lawyer and to see if those old custody papers were still in effect. And the lawyer said, if she's been doing what you say she's been doing, then, you won't there's no reason to fight because you won't win in court. So we didn't fight. He agreed to joint custody, and we live a mile from each other, and we worked that out as friends today. And I got a good home group in Rocky Mount. I came back to Rocky Mount. My sponsor in Wilmington was worried about me going back away from her so soon. She didn't know if I would be able to make it. But now whenever I see her, and I still see her every year at conventions and at the Midwinter and at the North Carolina State Convention, she says, and you went and found this great home group and this great sponsorship line. And she's so amazed every year that I see her. She says, I never thought you were going to make it. Now she tells me that. But at the time she didn't tell me that. But the miracles have unfolded for me. I've actually, after the time passed, had gotten into a group of people who carried the message into the same correctional facility where I was. So I get to go back into Fountain Correctional on a regular basis and tell my story. And this past year, it took almost a whole year, I took a group of ladies through the Big Book, and as a sponsor did with me. And that's the way I was sponsored in. My sponsor would read the Big Book to me, and we would take the step when we got to it. And that's what I have done with the ladies at Fountain. And it was a wonderful experience. We've kept in touch. Some have gotten out, and some are doing well. And you don't know. I'm not responsible for what they do when they get out, but to love them and to do the best that I can and to offer them what I was offered to me. I have found a new husband. We were in the same home group for about 5 years before we ever spoke to each other. And at some point, we both found ourselves single at the same time, and he said hello to me, and we went out to dinner, and within a few months, we were engaged, and a year later, we had a church wedding, and all of our home group members came to it, and that was like a fairy tale, because my first wedding was at a judge's chambers in White Plains, New York, and we had pizza off an ironing board for the reception. So it was amazing. I have a husband today that treats me with respect and love, and I've just never experienced the relationship that I have with him. My children have never had a memory of me being drunk. They were small enough that if they remember it, they don't say it. I don't even know if they know I was in prison. They don't ever say anything about it. But they know that I was gone for a while, and they know I was in Wilmington because they were brought to visit me. They know about a halfway house, and they know about AA because for many years my home group had babysitting, and they got to come with me a whole lot, and they know what we do. And they almost seem a little bit proud of it. Like I was telling them tonight, I had to come to Southern Pines to speak. And I thought I was getting sick yesterday, and I told my son, I said, I really hope I'm not going to be sick. This is not the kind of thing I want to bail out on. And he said, have you ever spoken there before, Mom? And I said, yeah, I have. But I could tell by his face that he wasn't sure what I was doing, but he was sort of proud of me. And my oldest son he's hoping to apply to the Naval Academy. He's a straight A student. He wrestles. What doesn't he do? They play in the band. I show up for their events. I used to not be able to even listen to them tell me a story because I was so disconnected and my mind was racing to other things, and they couldn't have turned out the way they've turned out without Alcoholics Anonymous grounding me. And the spiritual connection that I have made has enabled me to become a part of a church and bring them to church and to pray with them and to talk about God with them. And I'm feeling and I'm hoping that they've got a spiritual connection that I didn't have at a young age. And as I said, now we started a new home group last year. We go into 2 different treatment centers, one in Greenville, one in Rocky Mount, and we have men's and women's prisons covered. And as I said, I get to go into Fountain Correctional. I sponsor women. I have a sponsor. My life is so full today. I actually went back to school last semester and took chemistry because I was going to go back to nursing school. I found out that I can actually go back. They will let me go back. But when I took the chemistry, I realized that my life is so full right this second that I don't have time for it. But maybe when the kids graduate from high school in a couple of years, I may actually do that. But I just want to thank you all for having me here and letting me share my story with you. I wouldn't have a story if it wasn't for Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm grateful for every minute of it. Thank you.